Another idea from a comment suggesting it, so again, it's very much appreciated. Oh, Ultron, you cheeky devil. You prone to crash outs in your first hour alive, rascal. This had crossed my mind initially some time back, but I was hesitant to do so due to the too easy of a solution dilemma. Being taking the head from one of his Ultron bots and just sticking it on Ultron himself. But then after seeing this comment, I reconsidered and kind of realized that that's not easy, first of all, but was also motivated by this vision. It came to me in a dream, you see.
Dreaming.
The vision of Ultron with his comic-accurate emotionless cranium, with the pulsing Kirby darts bubbling from within the mouthpiece. That's when I knew he met the code and deserved a video. Those who were very familiar with Ultron from the comics were probably insanely confused when they saw how the MCU depicted him.
Clearly you've never made an omelet.
Going from a cold, calculated machine to a thing that can laugh and make sarcastic remarks. My introduction to Ultron was Earth's Mightiest Heroes, I'm pretty sure, where he was cleaning up fucking house, by the way. Unlike in the comics, his father was one Hank Pym instead of a Tony Stark. I know a lot of hardcore fans have probably ripped out a lot of hair at the thought that most people probably see him as Iron Man's creation now because of this film. And I have to admit, he was fun to watch. Of course, James Spader's voice and charisma is carrying the movie for miles, so I can understand why Marvel just couldn't bring themselves to strip him of all that. And in doing so, they opted for an Ultron with more external humanity that would manifest in a Stark-esque personality, opposed to a more internal struggle that he usually deals with. It's like they liked the idea of Ultron, but they didn't like the idea of having a villain they couldn't build jokes around.
I'm listening.
They wanted another Loki, a villain that could be in on the joke sometimes. Having him sigh and groan and laugh, it's just so strange.
Wait, guys!
This led to them giving him a face and lips. Yeah, it's a lot. It kind of makes you question why he'd intentionally manufacture himself a body with this capability. If anything, it would indicate that he wants others to see his humanity, and to be fair, that's mainly the case with one person in this film. But otherwise, he shouldn't want this part of himself exposed to such an extent. To me, it's pretty obviously an external creative's decision opposed to an in-universe character decision. I mean, how else is he supposed to look unamused at Tony's sarcastic remarks?
You're looking, I don't want to say puffy.
You're stalling to protect the people.
Well, that is the mission. Did you forget?
Why even pick Ultron as a villain? To set up civil war, I guess? I mean, when you look at their other rogues of villains, I suppose the likes of Kang or MODOK kind of relied heavily on concepts that weren't even established in the universe yet. I'm guessing Ultron was just a natural progression from Loki. At this point, they have zero access to a Doctor Doom or Galactus or any other X-Men or Fantastic Four related villain. I guess I just answered my own question. I mean, it's clear he can't control how similar he is to Stark, but he can for sure control how he looks. I think a cold face would actually show his contrast way better. A rigid, unreadable metal exterior with a clearly human personality. That could have worked, maybe. However, near the third act of the film, Ultron adopts a new form. The main noticeable difference being the face, much more reminiscent of the comics Ultron look. Even the eye sockets frame his original eye shape. He's also slightly less expressive, but it's clear that they didn't want to fully commit to that because at this point, Ultron fully becomes a joke.
Oh, for God's sake!
Being just so far removed from what they set up initially. The final confrontation with Vision is one of my favorite scenes in the film. Vision sees his fear, the very real emotions Ultron is quick to reject the existence of. And Spader's performance isn't neutered in any way. If anything, it's heightened by the lack of expressiveness, or the eyebrows, the blinking, the lips, all that shit, it's gone, but the performance is still there. When incorporating the head onto the body, I think we'll get a pretty great looking Ultron. I mentioned earlier that the eye sockets frame the classic comic eyes, so we'll build around that and show the energy glowing from within the mouth. I initially took a ton of reference images of the Ultron boss to make a head replacement, but I actually realized while outlining my plan that the solution was even simpler than I initially thought it was going to be, specifically with Ultron 2.0. This guy's an entirely different conversation though, we might have to stick with the original plan here. Ultron's kind of the odd one out on villains in the Avengers films. and it's looking to stay that way after the next two. People loved Loki, and even after Avengers 1 he stuck around as a fan favorite. Thanos was made a key part of pop culture for this generation because of these films. But Ultron fell short of having such an impact. What Loki may have lacked in intimidation on the levels of a Mad Titan maybe, he made up for in his charisma and his classic scheming. Hell, they love him so much they gave him his own show, and it's the best show they've made. Ultron just feels like an attempt to recreate that, but he lacks so much of what made Loki work, specifically being an actual human being. His grand introduction at the party was the perfect depiction of him, but I don't know what happened once he got his new body, but they just went off track entirely. They wanted desperately to have something that could emote. This is why they failed so much with him as a villain. Looking at how they tackled Thanos, and based on how the Russos have said they'll tackle Doom, they go heavy on the humanizing the villain route, which obviously doesn't work here. I know these are two different creative teams I'm talking about, that they have the same approach to villains. Well, with the Whedon films, the villains tend to be a part of the joke more than with the Russos. They can't work with a villain that's just a machine, that can't outwardly feel happiness or remorse, because they were probably scared of making him boring. A constant criticism around these times of the films. Every villain was boring, nobody cared. They were probably scared of doing that again, so they tried to have a villain that was like Loki, but it doesn't work because he's a robot. So they overcompensated and made a villain that doesn't have anything other than having a cool voice, that had zero impact other than the Sokovia Accords, and that we haven't heard of since this movie came out. There's been rumors circulating for years that this character will return one day. I mean, I want him to return. I'd actually like for them to correct all the mistakes they made with him here. The legacies of a Loki or Thanos live on even after they die. People for years after Avengers 1 still talked about the Battle of New York. But Ultron is just gone, and any impact he had died when people stopped caring about the Sokovia Accords. That was the impact he had, and creating Baron Zemo, I guess. If they just stuck with that initial version of the character they introduced, he could have been so much more. Again, I was introduced to this character through Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and he was one of the sickest villains in that show. At the end of the film, he just boiled down as nothing but something for the Avengers to punch. By the end of the film, he's completely in on the joke. All his intimidation is gone. He's just playing into the camp. You're not really scared for the Avengers when you hear this guy talk at this point. They're just going through the motions, like you know he's gonna lose. With Thanos, you had no idea what the fuck was gonna happen by the end of that film, cause he moved with so much conviction. But here Ultron is just as snarky as everyone else.